First up, he's the author of The End of Faith and Letter to a Christian Nation, as well as the co-founder and chairman of the Reason Project. I've been wanting to meet this man for a long time. Sam Harris. Sam. Finally. How you doing? I've followed your work closely, as you know, and I'm so glad you're here. And you are a non-believer.
Yes.
And I know people are going to kill, oh, Bill, you're always having your non-believer friends on the show. I don't have that many friends who are non-believers. I wish I did. But when I have one, I like to first find out your background, your evolution. How did you get to that place? Because most people are raised religiously. So how did you get where you are, and what advice would you give to kids today who want to break into atheism?
Well, it's, I mean, I started there, and that's kind of the point. Unless
you did?
Yeah, unless you're indoctrinated at some point early on, it's kind of like smoking. You tend not to pick it up later in life. I mean, there are exceptions to that.
As a child, you were an atheist?
Well, I just was not. Atheism has no content. I mean, being an atheist is like being a non-astrologer. You know, no one gets taught to be a non-astrologer. You just don't get convinced by astrology.
So what were your parents?
They were secular. I mean, God was just not talked about in the house.
Oh, lucky you.
The point is that atheism is not a belief system. It is the rejection of a certain style of dogma, and it's the dogmas of religion. And so every Christian is an atheist with respect to Islam. They're not convinced by the claim that the Quran is the perfect word of the creator of the universe. They're not losing any sleep over whether or not to convert to Islam. And an atheist is just someone who goes one God further and just does not accept any of these unsupported claims.
And what do you say to people who say to people like us, you're just being mean? You know, because I hear this all the time, you know, religion, it gives comfort to people. Why don't you let them have that? What is the answer to that, and to convince people that, you know, that comfort comes at a price? Right.
Well, there's this idea that religious beliefs can be kept separate, and they don't need to intrude into public policy, into politics, into science. And it's just not true. Insofar as somebody actually believes something, it inevitably shows up in the world. I mean, the beliefs are the means to organize behavior and emotion. And so presidents who really believe that the book of Revelation is a guide to the end times could very well lead us into wars that conform to those bogus blueprints. And we have a Muslim world that is lit up with notions of martyrdom and jihad. And these are beliefs, explicit beliefs about how you get into paradise and what it's worth living for and dying for.
But I can almost hear people out there saying, but that's not me. I'm a religious person, but I don't believe like George Bush did. I mean, there's a story in the press, I'm sure you've seen this recently, that George Bush told Jacques Chirac in 2003 that he was asking his help to go into Iraq because he said the biblical demons named Gog and Magog.
Yeah.
I don't know about these demons, but
nobody does, as it turns out.
Well, they're in the book of Ezekiel, and they're in the book of Revelations. But he said they were afoot in the Middle East. You know, what people say, well, that's not me. That's the extremist.
Right. Well, it's not extreme. I mean, the issue there is that, I mean, that should be horrifying to us, the Gog and Magog story, that those thoughts were rattling around Bush's head. But it should be horrifying but not surprising, because the evangelicals have been telling us for a century what they believe. 70% of evangelicals think that the Bible is a literal word of the creator of the universe and that all of those prophecies are valid.
Yes.
And about 40% of Americans generally believe this. So it's not just a few people believing these things. 80% of Americans think that Jesus literally rose from the dead, will be returning to earth to raise the dead. Francis Collins, who's like the poster boy for sophisticated faith now. I mean, he's not a fundamentalist. He's a scientist who's now running the NIH. He believes
this. This is Obama's appointment.
Yes.
Let's set the table for people who don't know this story. I know who he is.
Yeah.
Francis Collins. He is a brilliant scientist. You can't deny that. He mapped the human genome.
Yeah. Right? Well, he is often credited as a brilliant administrator, and he collaborated with 2,500 scientists who, in part, mapped the human genome. I mean, the problem is that you can be a working scientist and still believe unsupportable religious bullshit because nobody challenges it. I mean, that's.
No, I know So, and Obama has appointed him to be the head of
Yes.
the
Yeah.
NIH, which
Right.
is the National Institutes of Health.
Right.
Now, for the person who says, well, so what? He obviously is a scientist who can work in the lab and do scientific work and separate that from his beliefs about the space god Carpenter.
Yeah, but you can't actually separate these things, because if you believe that for instance, as he does, that morality could not possibly have emerged out of evolution, that it can't really have its basis in the brain, but rather had to be inserted by the hand of God at some point when we diverged from apes. I mean, he's written this, he believes this. Then, as someone funding neuroscience research, there's no reason to look for morality in biology, and no reason to fund a study that would explain its emergence out of the brain, which most serious scientists studying morality attempt to do. Your beliefs can't be kept. We have one sphere of reality that we try to represent in our thoughts, and this is why we've founded this foundation called the Reason Project, because we think it's a war of ideas that has to be prosecuted from many levels. You know, your level, I mean, you're on the advisory board, so someone like yourself from the entertainment business, but also scientists like Steven Weinberg and Craig Venter, to novelists like Ian McEwan and Salman Rushdie. We have to come to this from many sides all at once, because this is bigger than atheism. And reason is bigger than atheism. We have a problem of good ideas versus bad ideas, and the real double standard that we're suffering from is that religious bad ideas can't be criticized with any energy.
So answer me the fundamental question that I posed at the beginning of Religulous, which is, how can people like Francis Collins, but he's certainly not the only one.
No.
We're taping a show after this with Bill Moyers. I mean, I have unending respect for Bill Moyers as a brilliant man. He's also a Baptist minister. Jimmy Carter, you know, pretty bright. How do we reconcile someone who is so intelligent but who believes things which you and I think are incredibly childish and nonsensical?
Right.
Do we say that it's a neurological disorder do they have, or do we just say, I'm sorry, however brighter you are in the other field, you're a rube?
Yeah. No, it's a social disorder. It's a conversational disorder. It's the fact that we can't apply enough pressure to these ideas, and it's taboo to do so. And there's this fact that there is a core of truth to religion that we should be interested in. There's the fact that people do have transformative experiences. You know, if Jesus really was who they said he was, or Buddha likewise, it's possible, perhaps, to be the Tiger Woods of compassion. You know, it's possible to really to be someone who has transformed himself, and we should be interested in that, and we should want to actualize that and understand it scientifically. But the problem is that it's so mired in religious mumbo-jumbo and superstition and taboo, and religion has seemed to be the only game in town in talking about that possibility, and we have to overcome that.
And we will, with your help. Thank you very much, Sam. We'll talk again soon and more. Sam Harris, everybody. Thank you, Sam. Let's meet